Removal and rebuild of a PTO unit in a 1755, 1855, 1955, white 285, 2105, 288, and 2110. And I know there's a couple of others, but basically if you got this control valve right here, looks like this. This is what you need to do. I have to drain the rear end fluid. I got some buckets for that. Gonna need two. There's a drain plug that kind of, that's why up by the drawbar, that's why I got it swung to the side. Get this plate out of here, get the hydraulics just off to the side. Just kind of unbolt stuff. I got to pull the long PTO shaft, which I've got another video for that. So I'll put a thing up there. And I think that's about it. Remove bolts, lift unit off, put on table. All right, I'll get on that stuff. Okay, I got that brace off. I had to pull the drawbar out because it wouldn't swing to the side far enough. Let's see, brace is gone, move them over. Disconnect the hydraulic lines going to the valve, disconnect the lever. This line here just goes to the reservoir, so all I do is loosen it up a little, swing it up, and then tighten it back down, and then it's above the oil level and it doesn't leak on you. I still put a cap on it, keep dirt out. Took the top link plate off just because it kind of gets in the way. So now I'm ready to pull the long PTO shaft. I think we can make that the entertainment portion of this video. Let's see how long it takes me to actually get it out of there. I've misplaced my long pair of needle nose pliers, so that might make it a little more of a challenge. Ta-da! No swearing required. All right, all I need to do now is got the oil drained, so I just need to take the perimeter bolts of the PTO unit off. I'll take them all off except for two. I'll get the cherry picker up here and get it chained up, and then take the last two out. We'll come back. Okay, I've got all the bolts out. I like to leave the PTO shaft in, put a piece of pipe over it. Kind of gives me something to use as a lever to balance the unit out. It's more handy going in than it is coming out, but it's still good to have it coming out. So let's get the cherry picker up there. The reason it hasn't fallen out with all the bolts out is there is dowel pins on it. Getting it to pop loose can be a challenge sometimes. Well, it doesn't hurt to double check, make sure all the bolts are out. There's a dowel pin up here and a dowel pin down here. Feels like that side's gotten loosened up. Try a little over here. I can see it wiggling on this side. Bolts are all out. There, it broke free. Always nice to look in the back and not see any bits and pieces missing or laying around. This is an 1855 for those that are wondering. And here's a PTO unit. Barely made it up to the table. Apparently my cherry picker needs a little more fluid in it. We can start tearing it apart. Now getting your clutch pack out at this point is pretty easy. Just a snap ring. You know, keep track of where that goes. And the clutch discs will either spill out if you tip it over. But in order to fully disassemble it and do it right, change seals, which is usually the reason a person's in here to start with, we've got to get this hub out of here, so there's a snap ring there. Then the special tool comes in. The snap ring usually ain't too bad. Flat. I say that. Flat screwdriver under the end there. Tip it out. This hub should come right out. Now time for the special tool. There is, down in there, oh, man, that's been hit at some point. It's a snap ring right there. And it's under spring pressure, the spring that disengages the clutch pack or pushes everything back when you turn the PTO off, pushes against that snap ring. So you can't just reach in there and pull it off or everything's gonna go flying. The service book tells how to make a tool for that, and I've got one, so we'll do that. Here's a special tool. This is, someone just took a bolt, cut the head off, bent this end, put a roll pin through it, and then it's got these two ears to catch the gear there. And then, hey, this roll pin's been knocked through. This roll pin should be sticking up. I'll have to drive that. But you catch it in one of the bolt holes of the frame so it doesn't slip off on you. Like so. And then you can push down on it. Yeah, you definitely need to adjust that roll pin. You can hold down on it, and then you can reach in and get that snap ring without the spring pressure against it. Get my snap ring pliers on the snap ring. And just like that, this is out. There's the clutch pack. Clutch pack looks to be in good shape, which that's not why we're in here. We're in here because it's leaking. Oil out the output shaft. Yeah, those look really good. There's the return spring. Rest of the clutch pad. That collar. Come on. Okay, there's another snap ring inside there. One of these type of snap ring pliers. Because it doesn't have eyes on it. Snap ring, finally. This drum comes off. This is your PTO brake. Depending on the year and whether it's been updated, sometimes the brake is on the back side of the drum, sometimes it's on this disc. This pushes through the drum to activate the clutch. Pushes it. That's why there's the slots in the drum. Because this goes through there, pushes the clutch pack, makes it tight. And since it's all turning, there's a bearing right here. Last I knew, this bearing is available, but it's also very expensive. So, you know, if it's in good shape, leave it alone. Then there's a washer here. That's a smooth surface for the bearing to turn against. There. Just had suction holding it on there. Now we're down to the pistons. This outer piston is the brake. If you got the control valve off, you can just push some air in there and it'll pop out. Since I'm tearing it all the way down, we'll just go the easier route. 6 bolts around the perimeter there. I'm lifting at the dowels. That just makes it go. They're what's going to hold you up. Tools everywhere. All right. We're almost to the offending part. We can take that shaft out. And we can take, oh, this is still on the shift rail. I gotta disconnect that. But we can now blow a little air to pop those pistons out. There. This may look like one unit with some seals on it, but there's actually a second piston inside of there. There. Voila, 2 pistons. The 55 series Olivers used O-rings in some of the spots and quad rings in others. And then when they updated to the whites, they changed them all to quad rings, and that's all I use now. So if you're looking up parts, look in the 2105 parts book, at least for your quad rings, and well, they're pretty much everything. They're just updated versions. So there's those. I've got new O-rings and quad rings for those already. I just need to release the shifter so I can pull that gear out so I can get to the seal that was causing trouble. There's that. The bolt that's on the other end of the shifter. It's got a square head on it. I ain't gonna go through the seal to pull that off. But now I'm to the point where I can drive these 2 seals out. This bottom one, I've actually been in this unit a couple years ago and sealed it up. And this bottom one, I can see it's got the green stuff on it, but it still leaked around the outer edge of the seal. So I learned my lesson on that. Now I put aviation form and gasket stuff on the outside of the seals, even if they are coated with the green or red sealant. Just sure beats tearing them back apart again. So I gotta get a couple of wrenches. I can drive these seals out, and I'm already to where I can start going back together. Yeah, this baby's got to come off. Shifter. There's the seal that goes in on the shifter right there. I'll replace that too while I'm in here. Better safe than sorry. I'll get this gasket cleaned off and get her cleaned up before I start going back together. That's disassembly. Stay tuned, we'll put her back together. Here's your PTO gasket. Right there's your PTO gasket part number. Agco's the only place I know of to get one. A guy could probably get gasket material and cut his own out. All right, got my gasket all cleaned off. The bores for the seals are cleaned out good. That's the main reason I'm in here, is because of these seals, and this bottom one was actually leaking around the outside of the seal. First time I ever had that happen, so I want to make sure it doesn't happen again. So clean that out good, hit it with some carb cleaner to get any oil residue off. Gonna drive those in. Those, both the top and bottom seals are identical. There's the Agco part number 30-331-4324. But if you pop it out, there's a Chicago Rawhide 19243. So if you've got a source for seals, you might be able to get something that way. Ooh, and I missed a piece of gasket right there. Better get that. So I'll get my driver. I'm gonna coat these with some aviation gasket, which Permatex. It's good stuff, just to give it a little insurance about not leaking around the outside of those seals. And I gotta get my seal driver as well. And as a general rule, you want the lip facing towards whatever you're trying to hold in. So the lip side faces up like this when you got the unit facing up like this. What'd I do with my hammer? There it is. Okay, have both of those seals in, lip facing up. Next up is the seal for the shift rail for shifting between 540 and 1000. And that one is right here. That is a 158 354A. This is a national 480954. Don't know how well that's gonna show up. There, that looks good. There's a 15/16 deep well, Craftsman. Just happened to be the right diameter to drive that seal in. All right, next up, I got a, excuse me. I want to put a little bit of grease on the lips of these seals just so the shafts slide in easier. Don't need the springs popping off or anything crazy like that. There. Doesn't take a whole lot, but all right. This shaft, the lower shaft, is going to be the next one to go in. I want to change the seal inside of that, so we'll move on to that. Change the seal for the interlock plunger. I might need a slightly smaller screwdriver. There we go. Get this snap ring out, one of these style. Pull the spring out, and then push this to the edge of the table. There is a plunger in the middle. I'm going to stick the screwdriver up from underneath, push that out. There's a plunger. This is what the seal seals against. And then there is a spring-loaded pin in there that keeps you from putting it into 1000 RPM with a 540 shaft in it. Looks like this. Got a little spring on it that makes it pop in and out. And from there, let's set that down, flip it over. Now that's just the shift collar right here moving. Just need to drive the old seal out. There will be a washer in there that helps keep this plunger centered up. That's behind the seal. So I'll just carefully stick my punch down there. It's not much of a seal. Didn't take much at all to drive it out. And there's the washer. It's missing a washer. There's a washer. And that's the first thing to go back in. Here's our old seal. Wasn't in too bad a shape, but once again, I'm in here. I'm changing it. But that's a place that oil can leak outside your PTO unit, because this is where the output shaft of your PTO goes in, whether it's 540 or 1000. And so if that inner seal is leaking, it can come out through these splines right here. So good idea to change it while you're in there for the cost of a little seal. Let's see, I got one of those. Yes, that is a CR, which is also now SKF 9876. It's like 1.1/8" socket, and a Craftsman gonna work perfect. Let's see, I want to spray a little carb cleaner down there, get the oil off from the sealing surface. Brake cleaner, carb choke, just something to break the oil off. So that outside of that seals. Okay, that's coated. All right, going back together. Drop this washer down in there. I will take my light, make sure it landed down in there square. It did not. So, little poke with a screwdriver. Get it in place. Everything looks good. Same thing here. Get it tipped to where it should be. And hopefully this socket fits down in there all right. Just. A couple of taps with a hammer and should be in place. Looks good. Okay, now I got the fun job of getting that interlock pin back in there. There's a hole in the side, and oh, that wasn't so bad. The hard part is holding it out while you put that plunger in. Might have to come up from the bottom. Yeah. While I drop the other in the top. Careful not to damage the seal. What'd I do with it? There it is. I just need to guide it in. The pin wants the lockout pin wants to hold the center pin. Do I have it in the lockout position? Oh yeah, I had it in the wrong gear. I couldn't move that thing over if I wanted to. Got it. Whew. I had to put a finger in the other end to kind of center up that pin because the lockout pin wants to push it sideways so it doesn't hit the seal right. So kind of put a little pressure from one side, and it can be a bit of a pain in the butt, but it is in there. I'll double check, make sure. Yep, it's in the seal. Everything looks good. So now we put the spring in. And put the snap ring back in. And there we go. That seal is now changed. I've had trouble with it wanting to roll the seal. So I changed out the seal, but there's a taper here on the shaft to help it guide on the seal better, but it did feel like there was just a bit of a lip there on the other edge, so I did a little filing around here just to help guide it in better. Hopefully that makes a difference. Lube it up so further encourage it. All right, let's try this again. Shift rail, notches face down. Get that started. Make sure it's centered up as possible. Okay, it dropped down in. Hey, I got it this time. Pretty sure, just a little grease there. I guess I should have filmed what a rolled seal looks like. Yes, that looks much better. But you'll see the lip of the seal and probably some of the spring around on this side if you've rolled it. And it won't work that way. Alright. Alright, got that cleaned up. I'd ordered or bought enough stuff to do 2 of them while I was at it. I'm glad I did. That gave me an extra seal for this one when having trouble with it rolling. Okay, moment of truth on this one. Let's see if this one rolled its seal or not. It did just a little bit, man. I am not. Don't have my A game on today. Get that grease spread around there. Okay, let's check it again. They both look good. Thank goodness. Okay, before we put the next piece on, there is holes here. 2 of these take O-rings. They're high pressure. One's for the PTO clutch engagement, and the other one's for the PTO brake. The third one is lube oil from the transmission to lubricate the PTO clutch pack and bearings. But it doesn't take an O-ring. If any squeezes by there, it just goes back in the rear end, so it's not a big deal. The little bit of, I guess it wasn't worth the extra machining to put a third O-ring galley in, or O-ring recess. So I like to put just a dab of grease on those holes, and that makes the O-rings stick in there nicely and not come out. And the grease will mix in with the oil. It's Small amount of grease. It ain't gonna make any difference, or it never has in the past. And then we can set the top on for the next piece. I gotta clean that up some. Got my O-rings here. I'll put the specs for those O-rings in text here somewhere. And then there's also a seal in here. And it's important. It's a Chicago Rawhide 21101. And already got it in there. But it's for lubrication purposes. Once we get this set on there, and it's not nearly as hard to get lined up and dropped into place. But what it does is you got, once the shaft is in, seals against the shaft, and there's a hole down in here for transmission lube oil. There it is over there. And what it does is it comes in here, it can't get through because the piston will be here in a moment. So it goes through these holes in the shaft, and transmission lube pressure is only like 10 psi, so it's not a lot. Goes in through the shaft and then can come back out through the drum to lubricate the clutch discs. And all that good stuff. Basically fills the shaft up and just squeezes out through different holes. Keeps everything lubricated. Helps keep the clutch cooled off. So it's important. Plus, if this seal is bad and gone and the oil can go down the other way, it's just going to return to the reservoir, so you're not going to see the leak, but you could lose pressure, and then other parts of the transmission that rely on lube pressure are not going to get it, and you could have a problem with your transmission input shaft or something like that. So just a good idea to replace that seal as well. So now we got to just put the bolts in around here to tighten that back down. Now we're up to putting pistons in. Give this one more wipe down. Excuse me. All right. Inner piston. And the outer piston. So I got my O-rings. Let's see, let's do my quad rings. Let's do the outer one first. Set that there. And get my O-ring pick. Start picking. As I mentioned earlier, it's better to get the quad rings that they recommend in the 2105 parts book than in the 1855, 1755. Some of the older parts book, they just use regular O-rings. And these pistons are activated by hydraulic pressure, which is a different oil than the rear end. And so when these seals start leaking, the oil goes in the rear end. So, and that's why a lot of guys want to or end up doing this job is they're losing hydraulic oil to the rear end, and probably 90% of the time this is the cause. These seals have just gotten worn, and or they got hot at some point and brittle, and so they no longer seal. Oil gets by them, it goes in the rear end. So if you're in here for other stuff, it's still a good idea just to swap them out. Okay, so these are a quad ring. I got these from a place called the O-Ring store on the internet. It's out in Washington State. Been real happy with what I've gotten from them so far. Double check it against the other. I will get the white part numbers and the specs for these O-rings and add them in the text. Go around like that. Once again, I got enough to these to saved enough on them from this place to well, I went ahead and got enough to do 3 because shipping wasn't terrible, but these were cheap enough. It's kind of one of those might as well get a few of them while you're at it, because if I have to get them again, the shipping is gonna cost almost as much as the O-rings do. There's one. You want to make sure they're not twisted. That will not seal good if these two are identical out here. That's why I usually roll around a couple times. That helps make sure there's no twists. Looks good. Then I put some grease on them, help them slide in. That worked. You saw how well that worked with that seal. Just lube them up good. Film of grease is all it takes. But dry does not go so well. And from there, center it up. Try to drive it in nice and even. Take your time. Oh. Trapped air. Well, I know it's sealing good, because I could hear the air hissing out of the control valve over there. So there's that one. And then the inner one. Ouch. That's sharp. That one. Dang it. That one. Clean her up a little more. One of these. And what did I do with it? Make sure they ain't twisted. Some grease on them. And it's all nice and slippery. Okay. A little pressure on the other side and just carefully. We can feel it bouncing back because once again, trapped air. There. And that's the end. There's that thrust bearing. Lets everything roll. Make sure it's good and clean. There's another washer in this piece here. Oil suction's got to stay in there, but stick that in there. Okay. I think I need to blow that out. Sounded a little great. That sounds better. And there it is. Back to there. That sounds better. Our brake ring. Next piece to go on, and that's got to line up with those ears on the piston. There it goes. And then the snap ring to hold it on. This one, as we recall, was a bare coming off. Shouldn't be as bad going on. It's kind of a notch down in there. It kind of makes it tough to get. There. Okay, next thing to go in is the, I don't know what they call it, this ring. This ring, step side down, so it catches those 3 ears okay. There's that. And this baby. Let's see, and then this little thingy here is next. I'm sure it has a name too. We'll call it Joe. That helps keep the lube oil where we want it and keep the spring from rubbing against the shaft. And let's see, we could drop the clutch pack in. It would probably be easier though to put this hub in first. There's a snap ring for it. Sure it's good and clean. The bearing in there feels really good. No looseness, turns nice and smooth. So we're gonna leave that alone. This spring is the return spring that pushes the piston back down, that engages the clutch so that it doesn't drag. So it's got to be in there. And then this is where the special tool comes in. Again, I might have to grab the one out of the other building. It had a longer arm on it. Hook that there. There. Put my snap ring here. I should have had my snap ring pliers ready to go. But I managed to get it anyways. Snap ring looks closed up like it should. Suppose I could even do this piece. This is the one that actually engages that long shaft that goes all the way up to the engine. And it's the one that when you're trying to pull the shaft out, clang, 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 because it's not in sync with the splines that are down lower. You can see my removing the PTO shaft video explains it better, a little more visual. That drops in there. Then we put the snap ring in. Try to get one end started in the groove. Can't say I really care for these kind of snap rings, but it is what it is. There, I got that one started. That end of it. And it's in. So from here, we just got to put the clutch pack back in, or a new one. If you are putting a new clutch pack in, be sure to lubricate, especially the fiber discs, before you put them in so they're not running dry right at first. So we go steel separator plate. Yeah, these are in definitely good shape. So friction driver plate. Steel, you just alternate back and forth. Come on. Friction plate, just looking them over one more time before I drop them in there, make sure they're good. They look good and flat. That's one thing you want to watch out for. If they are warped at all, they'll get dish-shaped, and then they drag. But these are looking nice and flat, nice and smooth. And finally, this thicker washer, just a big thick washer, goes in there. This goes in here. The snap ring usually ain't too hard to get in and out. And there. It is all back together. Just needs to go in the tractor. Guess that's the next step. I don't see any leftover parts. That's always a bonus. Got my gasket, got the aviation gasket sealant on it. There is a way it goes because there is a lube hole at the top. That's how the lube gets in from the transmission lube system into the PTO. These are just a couple of 1/2-inch bolts. I ground the heads off from, give them a taper. Makes for nice guide pins for installing stuff. I think they're not too long for this, but they could be. But you guys that like to use the silicone and use the whole tube, first off, just, you know, it doesn't take the whole tube. But the other thing is, this hole here is where that transmission lube oil comes in. And so when you see all that silicone squeezing out around the edge of your PTO unit or whatever you've worked on, well, it's squeezing out on the inside too, and it's also squeezing into that hole. And it could fill and block that hole off. And even if it doesn't do it completely, a piece of that silicone could break off and go and block a hole. So just, you know, a film of silicone is all it needs, or this stuff. You don't need to use the whole tube, because all those little pieces breaking off inside the transmission, and they're just going to cause you grief down the road. I know this stuff works great, but moderation is the key with it. So I'm going to get that on the cherry picker and slide it on. That's about all that's left. Bolt it in there. Well, that wraps up the repair video for this one. As you can see, I'm putting oil back in, bolting everything back on. That should all be pretty straightforward. Just the reverse of the way you took things off. When you put the PTO shaft in, the long one that goes up to the engine, make sure it's in all the way. There's 2 grooves. The O-ring goes in the inner groove closer to the engine, then the plug, then the snap ring, then bolt the cover back on. That's pretty well covered in my PTO shaft removal video that I tagged earlier in this one. And other than that, you should be good to go. I appreciate everybody watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks again.